Hello, everyone who is here now. I'm going to give it a few more minutes for other people to roll in, but I see we have a number of people, and that's great. When I started talking, it was not 7 yet, but now it is, but I'm still going to wait a few minutes because I know my audience. And it is not an audience that shows up to things on time. The captioner has put in the chat a link to the stream text. I think this is one of those things where like you have to repaste it every time somebody joins or they won't be able to see it. There's an angry trans possum here. I'm super excited to meet them. Hi. Oh, it's Bridget. Never mind. Hi. I've met you. Okay. Yeah, we'll start at 7:02. That seems like the right time to start. And I won't make you listen to my music anymore. So. Oh, and you are allowed to turn on your cameras. I just had them default to off, so nobody was surprised by like being exposed. But it's totally up to you. But yeah, you're allowed to like use your face. Which do I prefer? Oh, I don't really have a preference, but it is weird when nobody has, like when you're teaching class and all the students are behind their little black boxes, it's kind of like sad. But I don't have a preference, and I present in a way that lets me see both what I'm presenting and your faces. I do have slides, but they're actually an aid for me, and they're adapted from a prior presentation that I gave to a different audience, and it's just to keep me on task. There will be jokes. There will be jokes. Okay, so, well, I was going to start right now, but the numbers were increasing a bunch. Okay, I'll start now. Okay, hi. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is a like low formality little webinar on executive function and metacognition designed for neurodivergent burnouts. Thanks for being here, everybody. And I really appreciate everybody who donated to my friend's GoFundMe. And I don't keep track of who has done that. I was just using this as an opportunity to funnel attention towards her, and I'm really grateful to everyone who donated. Thank you. And if you still haven't, but you plan to, I'll just remind you again at the end of the session. But it's not me anyway, it's fine. Hi, words. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to say before I really got started was that this is, for those of you who don't know me, you might not know this. So for those of you who do, you'll be like, yes, I expected this. But anyway, this is not a overcomey boot camp girl boss kind of a, first of all, I'm not even a girl, but anyway, like it's not that kind of a thing. I am not here to like tell you how to become normal. I am here to tell you how to become even more weird in a way that is useful for you. That's what we're here for. We're here to talk about the magic of friendship and other things. I'm a doctor. Anyway, I'm going to share the slides. I'm not doing it in presentation mode though, so that I can actually still see your faces on the separate screen. So that is what I am doing. And again, the slides are for me. They're not for you, but you can like use them also because they're there. I will give a visual description of myself also, and I will describe the slides visually to the best of my ability. So I am Rue Williams. I am a white non-binary person with round glasses and the obligatory shaved side of head thing. And yes, I see you. And I am in my office on campus because it has the better internet. And oh, also it has no children in it. I have 3 children and they're very present all the time. So they're not here. And there's I didn't realize this, but there's a little axolotl in the background. Say, hey. Okay, it's not real. It's not alive. That'd be nice. I don't have one of those yet, but it's a stuffed animal. Okay, anyway. Okay, so I'm sharing the slides and you're going to see the PowerPoint interface the whole time, which is really annoying. You can hit escape and it will take you back out to the gallery view where you can also see the slides if you are interested in them. So you can sort of adjust this experience for whatever works for you. If you were here before I began, you were listening to Grizz Radio on Pandora, for which I am sorry. And I was making coffee, which I have here. Yes, it is 7 p.m. I didn't say everything I would teach you today would be appropriate or adaptive. It would probably be maladaptive. Anyway, so here we go. We're going to start with this slide. So the title of the presentation that I gave to another group of people was called Being Kind to Ourselves, and I just left it. I could have changed it to The Magic of Friendship or something, but I didn't. And so I'll be talking about very briefly executive function and metacognition. And many of you know what these things are. You have your own working definitions of these things. They are very relevant to you in your daily lives, but some people might not know what these are, or they may not have heard them framed the way that I will frame them. And so I will do that to sort of set up the rest of the conversation. Then I will talk about some of the more like dominant things that I saw in the question form that I sent out, where I had some responses, and I'll call out some of those things and talk about them. And then you will be able to ask your own questions, which you can do in a multitude of ways, because I know that using your mouth parts may not be the way that you want to do that. That's valid. So you can continue to use the form that I sent out, which I will put a link to here. You can continue to use this form to put anonymous questions, and you can also type in the chat. I have it up, I can see it. And you can also like unmute and ask a question. You can do any of the things. Okay, all right, great. I want to skip the slide about me because I hate it, but I'm gonna do it because you don't all know me. Oh, there's 45 people in here now. Wow, okay. Anyway, hi, I'm Rua Williams. I could be kind to myself, Phoebe, but that would be too meta. Okay, anyway, I refuse. I am Rua Williams. I have a PhD in human-centered computing, but I really am masquerading as a computer scientist. I'm really doing critical disability studies and science and technology studies. I do a lot of yelling at scientists for bad ethics. They don't like it. That's fine. And I have done some work where I'm actually studying what I call autistic technocultures, which is about how autistic people actually organize themselves into communities and with distributed networks, and how our sort of distributed care networks, or care webs, to borrow from Leah Lakshmi, Yepsana Samarasana, how these things subvert these expectations that we are either fully independent or that we are institutionalized or in a care home. So that didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it may later. I don't know. This author of this was here for somebody else. I don't care. You don't have to look at that. Okay. What's this? Okay. So what brought you here? I don't know. But for many of you, it maybe, I used the word neurodivergent burnout. So there's some ADHD people in here. There's some autistic people in here. There's some both. There's some people with OCD. Traumatic brain injury is a very executive dysfunction-y condition. I am sad to say that more and more of us will have long COVID and dysautonomia. That may be why you're here. Chronic illness, brain fog, and even aging in place are reasons why you might be here. And then the things that you all share, no matter why you're here, are executive functions. And so this is something I want to talk about a little bit, because we're used to hearing, at least in the neurodivergent community, we're hearing about executive function or executive dysfunction as a thing that we are bad at. And while I can't really claim that that's not true, because I'm living in it, but I want everybody to know that everybody has executive function and everybody experiences executive dysfunction. We just experience it more spicier than everybody else. And so executive functions are cognitive processes that govern task initiation, which many of you may be familiar with being bad at, motor planning, attention sustainment and shifting, and other aspects of goal-oriented action. Do I have it? No, it's in my other office. There's a textbook on executive function that I have, and it's got 12 chapters, and there are 12 definitions of executive function. So executive function researchers don't have enough executive function to define executive function. So don't feel bad. And so everybody has executive functions, and different conditions can make it harder to execute those functions. And the most commonly studied are neurodevelopmental conditions like autism and ADHD, but also conditions of aging, such as menopause or mild cognitive impairment, depression, stress, medication, the coffee, other chemical substances all influence executive function. And so what does executive function feel like, or executive dysfunction feel like? How is it experienced? These are those feelings of being stuck, unable to do something that you want to do, making a mistake during a repetitive task, or making a mistake during something that you feel like you should know better. Feelings of being disoriented, struggling to understand objects in space, and being confused, having to switch tasks and getting lost in that progression of tasks. Those are just some examples of what it feels like, which you all know, but I thought sometimes it might be nice to hear them said out loud. Also, we almost all have alexithymia, so maybe these descriptions were helpful. So metacognition, may or may not be known as much. So executive function is much more commonly known to people who identify as neurodivergent, whereas metacognition may or may not be. And one of the reasons for that is actually that we study metacognition intensely in medicine and the military and in sports, and we don't study it in disability, despite the fact that we have identified executive function as something that can be mitigated or ameliorated by metacognition. We just decided to not study it in the group of people most affected by that. So that's fun. So there's also this process of what we consider typical or traditional metacognitive strategies have been theorized as being acquired through enculturation, or you get brought up in it, right? But that means that neurodivergent people who are excluded from social norms by stigma and bias don't internalize these strategies, partly because we're actually not included in them. And instead of internalizing the strategies, we often internalize ableism instead. We blame ourselves for this sort of chronic sense of disconnection to what we want to do and our body's ability to do it. And so here are some metacognitive strategies that I didn't actually say out loud what metacognition was. Sorry, I will say that. Metacognition consists of the conscious, deliberate strategies and beliefs a person uses to choose, plan, progress, and complete goals. And so this is why I say when you don't internalize the traditional or typical strategies. What you internalize instead is often internalized ableism and a sense of your own personal failure. Some strategies, these range from the more commonly accepted strategies to ones that I'm asserting are strategies. So there's task chunking, which I think many of you have heard of, but it's actually, it requires executive function to task chunk. So it's hard because you have to task, you have the task, and you can't do it. And it would help if you could break it down, but to break it down requires effort and it's hard. So, but there are things that we can do to make it, to support ourselves and to support each other through the, Visual and tactile strategies. And so these are actually based on my research with autistic people. And this has to do with representing tasks in prominent spaces to visualize or feel your progress. And this has to do with using like whiteboards or cork boards or visual schedules, things that we often consider to be like childish or like supports that are only supposed to be for disabled children. When we continue using them in adulthood because the physicality of them works for us, that's okay. There's no sticky note police coming to yell at you for using too many tactile cues. One of my favorite stories that like many different participants told me about in a study that I did with autistic adults was that they would put things in the way. So they would tape bills to their monitor so that they would have to pay the bill first. Or they would put the box of tea that they needed to buy in front of the door. So they couldn't leave the house without seeing, oh, I have to buy the tea. And yes, it's also possible to just like kick the box out of the way and forget about it. And that's fine. But actually, you know, after a while, the strategy might work, or it's okay for it not to work for 3 days and to work on the 5th day. You know, those are things. What we call echopraxia, or like parallel play or body doubling, is working alongside someone else. And I have a lot of ideas about how you can make that happen even when you don't have people in your physical space with you. And I'll talk about those things. And then this 4th metacognitive strategy, there's not just 4, I just have 4 here. This 4th metacognitive strategy is one that's not considered, I don't think anybody has written about it like a metacognitive strategy, but it's actually anti-ableism. And that's combating your internalized ableism by internalizing a sense of disabled identity and community so that you can revolutionize your relationship with yourself. Now, many of us here identify as disabled and like believe in disability community, but we actually haven't gone further than that to love ourselves. You know, or we're so wrapped up in the very real and present chronic fight of like just being allowed to stay alive that we are not thinking about how the way we think about our own capacity for work is inherently ableist. And so we'll talk about that some more. So the next part is where I'll go over some of the answers that are already in the question form, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. But first, or not first, but while I do that, I'm going to keep it on this slide that has the different strategies because I might refer back to them. For the record, this other slide was just titled Scenario Exploration and Collaborative Problem Solving, and there's a background that Microsoft PowerPoint gave me, and it's just people like drawing on a whiteboard. Okay, so these questions. Nope, that's not it. Oh, yes. Okay, good. I was really worried that I was going to turn around and you were going to have added like 20 more questions, then you didn't. So that's nice. Somebody mentioned like one of their problems is accomplishing tasks that they're super behind on and they feel a lot of shame about. And I really appreciated this and I wanted to talk about it specifically because the shame can be one of those things that actually prevents us from initiating a task. And the shame is real, and you're allowed to feel shame. And I'm not going to tell you stop feeling shame, because that's not useful, right? But I do want you to think about, try to think about where the shame comes from. Sometimes it comes from, well, if I do it now, people will notice, and then they will do things that make me feel more shame. And that can be a big aversive that prevents you from finishing what you need to do. But I think that a lot of times the shame is not really that productive. And this part of like anti-ableism for yourself is part of how you get rid of that shame. And we can talk about that more later. There was also a really great one that's sort of related to academia, but also other kinds of production in work. And so in this case, the person feels finished with a project and wants to move on and not do any like editing. And I feel that intensely. I have two solutions for this. One, oh, and I guess it's more like three. But one is to have the document read to you by like the word read aloud or something. If the computer is reading to you, then you can point out like grammatical errors easier. And so I do this sometimes when I really need to edit something and I don't want to. That's helpful. Another thing is to use friends and just say, okay, it's done now. I have a trusted person that will look at it and tell me what's wrong. Both of these things don't really work if you're like right up against a deadline. And so this is where I come to my third solution, which is that I just submit myself to the crypt tax of the work that I do taking longer because it gets sent back because I didn't edit it. And so in the academic sense, this means that I get papers rejected because they don't make sense. And they don't make sense because they make sense to me, but they don't make sense to a neurotypical reader, and they don't have a logical structure, and they're not linear. And so I use the review process as a way to figure out what they want me to make the order be, because I could sit there and edit that paper for days and it would never be what they wanted. So this means that my work takes longer. And that is a reality that actually endangers my job. And so it's not like something I feel comfortable recommending to you, right? Because it's like, yeah, just take longer and hopefully nobody fires you. But that's the reality of what I do. And in a positive environment where people were actually supportive of you, and that would be like a collective effort for editing the work. There was a lot about, feeling stuck, not being able to get out of the house or off the couch. And this is a real problem, and this is where body doubling really comes in handy. And obviously, if you don't live with anybody, it's hard. Or if you don't live with anybody you trust, it's hard. And this is where I use people on the internet. And there's and other people I know have used this strategy as well. And there's various ways to do it. I've had friends ask me to text them every day and remind them to do a thing. I have had friends jump on a video call with me so that I can eat, because they'll eat with me. I have had people Zoom in and like work with me. And they're doing their own thing and I'm doing my own thing, but like the body presence, even though it's a digital one, is working. I have even thought about, but I haven't done it yet, so I don't know how well it worked. I have thought about putting googly eyes on my houseplants. I think maybe I would love it if somebody tried it and let me know if that works for you. It might. I don't know. And you could like draw a little computer laptop for your houseplant and you could stick it in there and just like work mode. I believe that this will work for someone. I don't know if it's going to be me, but I think it might work and I think it's fun. Cleaning is really hard. So there's two things I want to talk about with cleaning. And one is your house dirty? Is your house unsanitary? Or is it just messy? And be way more forgiving with yourself if it's just messy. And if you feel like it's so bad that it's endangering your health, then yes, let's work together to find like support for you. But a lot of this feeling of shame around my house isn't clean is actually like fake. Yeah. Now, when you really do have to clean something, and there are videos of people cleaning on YouTube. So like if you can't get a body double to like, you know, zoom in with you and you both do dishes together or something, there are videos on YouTube of people doing household tasks, and sometimes that works. You put on like the cleaning show and it just goes and you just start doing dishes. And that's an option. Another option is to understand when you have really low spoons and be okay with like lots of paper plates. Like that's okay, like for a minute when you're like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do dishes. I just need to eat off of paper plates for a month. There's no paper plate police. So you can do that thing. Paper plates with googly eyes. Yeah, yeah. You could try that. You could put googly eyes on your coffee cup and maybe that can be your buddy. There's a lot of stuff in here in these questions too about managing the fluctuation in capacity. So like there's times where we feel really energetic and are able to do a lot of things, and then there's times when we are really burnt out. And some of us have the problem of like overcommitting when we feel energetic and then collapsing under the weight. And I don't have like a magic bullet for that. Other than trying to reprogram yourself to have stricter rules about like, if you agree to 5 things, start agreeing to 2 things. That's a really like blanket statement that doesn't really work. But in general, what I'm saying is that if you start thinking, and even journaling, which I know is really annoying, like if you really start thinking about how many things you take on and like what you feel like is your capacity, half it. If you're used to estimating how long it takes you to do things, I'd triple it. And I got into that habit when I was working in the game industry and I was like leading an art team, and they would ask me, how long does something take? I would always take my estimate and multiply it by 3, because then when something goes wrong, the estimate doesn't fall apart. And then when something goes right, you look really cool. So that's the thing. I have a new one that should. So the body doubling thing is not a universal solution for everybody. Like somebody has mentioned that sometimes it actually is distracting, that the other person, like they want to talk to that person and socialize and not just be in the same place and sort of borrow the physical momentum of the person in the room with them. And that maybe just means that body doubling isn't a solution for you, or it may mean that the person that you choose to body double with might also need to support you in like refocusing your attention and saying like, I love you and I love chatting with you, but I'm actually here to support you in doing this thing, and we're not doing that thing. And those are the kinds of things that you can ask people for, especially when you work on that anti-ableism in your relationships. And so here's a specific question related to academia and executive dysfunction in academia, impacting your job. Yeah, so One of the things where it shows up the most, I think we'll all identify with this, is forms. Forms make me want to die. And what I have done is I have had people sit with me and do the form. I was like, you have to sit here while I do this form. And I've been lucky that people will do that with me. And after the first few times of having somebody do that, I'm able to do them on my own after that. But the first few times I need somebody to sit with me and like walk me through the form. I have even done this for somebody who was paying me to do. In fact, the thing these slides come from was from something where I had to fill out this huge form to do it. And I made them sit with me while I did the form because the form was so overwhelming. And so that's a place where you can use strategic disclosure. You can say, you know, I really have a hard time reading the forms and I get lost in them and mixed up. And so I need you to sit with me while I do it so that I know I don't mess it up the first few times, and then I'll get it and I won't need help anymore. Or maybe you do still need help and you just say, I just need some help. And that's one of those things that like it works in some places and it doesn't work in others. And I can't actually like magically make people not suck. So like some people will get that support and other people won't. And that's what's really unfair about having sessions like this, because a lot of it depends on the people around you being good. And that's where I'm very lucky in that I feel like I have people around me who are good. There are other things that I do as far as strategic disclosure, like if I'm dealing with somebody that I don't know very well, and they want to have a phone call. I say, no, I'm sorry, I got to do either email or a video chat with captions because I have a neurological condition and sometimes I can't articulate my thoughts and I need to be able to type. And so I leave it really vague at like neurological condition. And that it's vague and also scary. People are like, oh, the brain. And then and so it kind of shows you either they're straight up assholes from the beginning, you know, or it like sort of like acclimates them to this idea of being accommodating to somebody. Yes, it is possible to not explain the entirety of your diagnostic like laundry list in order to get accommodations. And yeah, so you can reframe it. And saying I have a neurological condition is not inaccurate. I have chronic migraine, that's in the brain. Autism and ADHD are neurodevelopmental conditions, neurological. So it's not a lie either. Although we should all be a lot more comfortable with lying to employers because they suck. How do you manage emails? When I notice that a certain sender is obviously junk, I start making the effort to hit the unsubscribe button so I stop getting it. And I also have a habit of, in the Outlook web interface, pinning messages that are actually to-do items. And then I go through them. And that way I don't forget them and they don't get buried. Other people are way better and they make other folders and they have a whole method for their inbox. I don't do that. Folders can be really helpful, but like anything, when you try to make a system for something, that is a really large barrier to entry, because you feel like the executive function required to set up a system to facilitate your executive function is really overwhelming, and sometimes it can make you just not even start. Yeah, and that actually brings me to something else, which is that I refuse to be bound by any specific method. And this took me a long time. And this is not, I'm not trying to be moralistic about this. I'm saying that this is something that has helped me, is to just be able to let go of trying to do a certain process or method For example, bullet journals were super popular and everybody was super into them, but they seemed so specific and so rigid. And instead, what I did was I just came up with my own like method for the bullet journal, but I also had to very intentionally tell myself that it was okay if I skipped a day or a month. It was okay for that journal to be imperfect and incomplete and have empty spots in it. Allowing myself to have the journal have like messed up spots was one of the only ways I was able to get over not being able to start a system to help me because I wouldn't do it perfectly and then I wouldn't do it anymore. And likewise, I have a journal. I have not used it that much recently. I used it extensively when I was in grad school and had classes. And I used it through most of my dissertation. And I still use it when I go to conferences to take notes, because otherwise I just live tweet everything and do a bunch of snarky shit on the internet, which I do both, but that's. I also have a Trello board or multiple Trello boards. There's nothing special about Trello. I just feel like it doesn't give you any rules about how you use it. And so I just use it sometimes. And I have done, I'll share this, hold on. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I have a Trello board called Executive Function, which is totally dysfunctional now. I don't think I use it anymore. No, I haven't touched it in a long time, but I was using it at one point, and it's fine that I don't use it anymore. It helped me when it helped me, and now I don't need it. I need something else. I had a board for my qualifying exam, and I had every single paper in the literature review put as a Trello card, and I put all my notes in it. That was something that I did. And then I organized them in a way that like, let me write the paper. These are like the subsections of the paper. I actually only did that once. I didn't need to do it anymore after I did it for my qualifying exam. I feel like doing this taught me how to write a paper, and I didn't need to do that anymore. But I think sometimes when I get really overwhelmed with something, it's a good way to go back and try it out. And you don't have to do it in Trello. It's just just happens to work for me in that spot. Like, I'm not here to like tell you everybody use Trello. That's annoying. I'm not doing that. I use it a little bit in my lab to help students go through tasks, to help them see what I expect them to do and when, and help them communicate with me about their progress in a way that's not like more authoritarian. It kind of gives them a place to communicate about their progress. I have Evernote, and I used it for a long time, and then I stopped using it, and now I'm using it again. I mostly use it for research, for storing things that I need to copy and paste into emails when I might be in multiple places. Like if I'm not at my desk at work, I still want to be able to onboard a participant for research. I'm also terrified taking track of my speaking engagement fees because taxes are going to be scary. I don't want to do that. Another thing that I've been using recently is TickTick, not to be confused with TikTok. And oh no, what's happening? Oh, it's Damian Patrick Williams' bibliography for his dissertation, everybody. Yay. Don't do your regular internet tabs on a webinar. I mean, that's fine, but now I'm lost. Did I close it? What happened? Okay. Yeah. So I keep like my paper assignments, and like when I have to grade stuff, you can see like I was grading, you might not be able to see this because it's really gray on gray and it's small. I'm I'm not, but it's like, these are like, when I was grading, when I was writing, when I was reviewing papers, little tasks, like I have to purchase participant compensation, or I have to purchase equipment or something, all of that. Is this a troll? This is tick tick. Okay. And something else people are really into right now, I have an account, but I haven't tried it yet. Something people like this thing called Notion. It's an app. I haven't tried it, but you know, I feel like it's a lot. And that's the thing about Trello, is I feel like there's not a lot going on. And it just is a little bit easier to do stuff in it and to not worry about, like, did I classify this card correctly? No, it's just it's a sticky note in a digital form. I used to have, forever ago, let's hopefully not expose any student data in this thing. Okay. I used to have like sticky notes that come on Windows all over my screen, like all over it. I don't do that anymore. But what I'm not saying, what I'm saying is that, like, multiple methods at the same time, the chaos in task tracking is okay, as long as it's working. Whatever you need to work that day, it's okay to let yourself be a little chaos gremlin. Like, it's okay to be hyperactive even in your task management strategies. You don't have to be orderly in a way that like matches what people think is like organized. It often doesn't work for us anyway. And yeah, I actually do super advocate for paper in the case of where you don't have any process and you're trying to figure one out, because paper is really low stakes. There's no pre-existing interface. There's no rules about what anything is, and you can just write stuff. And eventually you can find a way to make what you write make sense to you. But really it's just, you know, I find that we need each other, and we need to be able to ask for help from each other. And for example, in the task chunking example, where task chunking is literally necessary to have better executive function, but also requires executive function to do. Sometimes you need help from your friends to do task chunking. You have this thing, this impossible task. Somebody might need to literally hold your hand and break the task down. And like, it's okay. Some of the people in the chat have mentioned different groups that do these kinds of things. And no, stop. Oh, okay. So there's a Facebook group called Neurodivergent, but Make It Community. No, you know, not everybody's on Facebook, right? But this is like the kind of place where you can go to like ask for help with things. Autistify Habitat is a website. This comes from a blog post by Cassiana Asasumasu about like there not being any sticky note police, and about how you can use visual schedules even if you're an adult and it's okay. And then that NEIS, the No End in Sight Void hashtag on social media, might be a good place to find solutions for like getting through tasks and brain fog. Oh, my screen is blank right now. Cool, thanks. That's good. I should just go to here. It was just this. It was just this. This was the slide that I was talking about while not showing you. So yeah, Autistify. Yeah, Autistify your habitat. So I was trying to keep up with the questions in chat and in the form. But does anybody want, you can't find it on Google though. I wonder if it's dead. I'm really worried about that. Some of this stuff is old and it's starting to die. Like, it's really hard to find stuff. That Cassiana wrote, actually. This is not her, but it's still, anyway. Yeah, so what I wanted to say is I wanted to give people a chance to use their mouth parts if they wanted to ask questions that way. Also, there's a comment in the chat about Twitter and the community there. Yes, that's a big problem. And I'm not here to proselytize about Mastodon because it's actually kind of a white supremacist shit show. It's not, well, white, anyway. I have had success on Mastodon personally, but it's got a long way to go before it, you know, it's yes, thank you for sharing Jonathan's essay on the whiteness of Mastodon. That's really good. Yes. So there was an NEIS void Discord and it just recently collapsed. They're starting another one. Discord is really, I feel, difficult to follow. It just doesn't have the same, and that's where I think Mastodon has some of similarities to Twitter. But for now, you know, I'm not leaving Twitter because I'm not leaving the disability community on Twitter. But yeah, we have to find ways to stay together. It's true. No, Discord is really difficult. We just said we have to find ways to stay together, and that's, it's going to be hard, but we're going to do it. It's going to be okay. All right. Anybody want to ask a question either in the chat or with your mouth or in the thingy? Yeah, so the recording will be made available immediately and then eventually a corrected transcript, although we actually had captions, cart captions provided, so there might not be much to correct. So cart captions were provided by Do It, an Access Comp at University of Washington. Those things might be correct, and the captionist can't tell us because she's busy. But anyway, they were provided to us. Thank you so much. Real captions, and they've been really good. But yes, the recording will be made available as soon as possible, and I'll be sharing it with people who didn't come and stuff. And I'm actually here until 8:30. I just didn't want to like be here. Like I didn't want it to be like, I'm going to be here for an hour and a half because that's ridiculous. But I will be here for you for an hour and a half if you want me. What I'm trying to say. I do a mouth bar question. Yes. Okay. Okay. The hands raising. I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see the hands, because the hands I can't see without stopping that. Okay. So is that Kegel?
It is, but Michael raised their hand first.
Oh, first? Okay, Michael, please.
Oh, thanks. So I really liked what you said about like shifting systems when they're no longer, you know, useful. But also, like you said, it takes like mental bandwidth to like onboard a new system. And I guess, I don't know, I have this like dream version of me that finally finds a system that I can actually like maintain and stick with. I sort of mentioned in the chat that like the hardest part for me, I think, is just continuing to engage with the system and not dropping it when like things get chaotic or like other things come up in my life, and then like I stop checking emails and I stop using my task manager and stuff, and then just like I just wonder whether you have any advice for just like, I mean, you've already given a lot of advice, I guess, about continuing to engage with systems, but I guess specifically like for the moments in your life when like things start piling up and like, or there's a major disruption in your life or something, and it like throws you off, and then like how to kind of regain balance and without everything just kind of going out that you've built going out the window, ideally.
Yeah, so I feel like one of the things, this may not be true for you, but I feel like one of the things that prevents us from like getting back to it after we've fallen off is the shame of like, we fucked it up.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I just had to get over. And that's like not a very helpful way to like, you just got to get over it. Like, but like I had to forgive myself for not having a complete chronology of my life in this little notebook. I had to forgive myself for that. And I had to think about it less like something to perfect and more like it's useful to me today. I didn't use it yesterday, and I'm going to use it today. The other thing that I wanted to point out was you talked about like this dream of like sticking to something, like finding the right method for you and sticking to it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that aspiration is actually causing trouble, or could cause trouble, in that, for example, Twitter is collapsing. Any of the technologies that you rely on to do your system could disappear. Google could disappear. Your Google Calendar could disappear, which, by the way, I use Google Calendar like a lot, and it's color coded and it's ridiculous. But like, and before that, I missed appointments and would get like excommunicated from medical practices. So like, it was the thing. You know, and even pen and paper, you know, there can come a time when you can't see well enough to write, or you can't, your tremor progresses and you can't write anymore. So like, there's no system that's going to last you your whole life.
Yeah. Thank you. That's actually really helpful. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I felt a bit like I was being mean.
No, I know. I think I needed to hear that.
Your dream is bad. No. Okay.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's yeah, it's not necessarily a negative aspiration to like try to be a little more consistent, but like it can definitely turn. Yeah. No, it's, yeah, you're right. There is no perfect system. I think like, and perfectionism is toxic. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, Kegel.
Thank you. I'm going to sit with that for a while, by the way, this point about like, even if there was a system that worked perfectly for me for right now, for like all things that eventually, like I do have a tremor that runs in my family, and like I have an uncle who can't write anymore, and like that's, yeah, so that's really useful perspective. Thank you. I was going to ask about, I submitted a question like late, like after the session started, because I didn't even think about this as connected to executive functioning, but the thing where I have like 2 or 3 days of just pure exhaustion after finishing a project or like having a big task off the to-do list. And I think, reflecting on what you've been saying, like, I think that's related to the amount of executive functioning required to get through the end of something. Like, so most recently for me, it was submitting a paper, right? Where it's like, it's not just finishing writing the paper. It's like, you have to write the letter to the editor and like, you fill out a bunch of forms.
The whole form. Yeah, you write the paper and then you're like, yeah, I wrote the paper. And then you have to fill out a form to write the paper.
Yes, exactly. And so it feels like on days where I do that, or even days where it's just like, man, I really nailed this executive functioning thing today. Like every time I thought of something off task, I wrote it down on my whiteboard for that. And like every time someone emailed me about something, I added it to the calendar. And then I'm exhausted for like the next 2 days and don't do anything at all. And like, I don't know how to manage those rhythms, I guess.
Yeah. So spoon theory applies here. So it's not chronic pain. It's not like you walked too much today and now you can't walk tomorrow, but you executive functioned too hard today and now you have to sleep for 3 days. And I sleep an entire day after I submit a paper. I also sleep an entire day, any chance that I get, because my toddler is not sleeping and I'm gonna die. But anyway, yes, I will sleep an entire day after like a conference deadline or something. Yeah, and the thing is there's not actually a good level, medium, moderate way for us to manage that, because capitalism does not allow. Again, capitalism often doesn't allow us to have that day where we sleep the whole day. For like, that's an option for me, and that's great, because when it wasn't, there were bad things happening to my body. But like, it's not something to aspire to, because it's actually just not good for you. I have tried a lot harder to self-impose deadlines such that I'm not crunching on something before it's due, but I do tend to just crunch earlier. So I have actually managed to trick myself into doing something, into having a deadline that's sooner than it's actually due, but that still means that I usually like binge do that task for 3 days. I just have more, it helps me have a more realistic sense about what capacity I have at certain times, because I always fake my deadlines. Like if I have a deadline on the 15th, then it's actually on the 30th of the month before, or that kind of thing. And it takes a while to actually operate as if that deadline is real. And I think putting it on the calendar helps, because then it becomes an object and you're like, it's real now. But yeah, our brains like to do executive function spike and then slug. And we have to just find a way to make that work when we are lucky enough to have the ability to make that work, because that's what our brains want. They want to binge on something and then fall asleep for 3 days. There's a lot of new messages. I managed to find a Bi Pride Poppet, everybody, look. Okay. So somebody had asked about tying executive function and metacognition, and you're right, I didn't do a good job of explaining that connection for sure. Yeah. So a lot of the research on executive function in disabled populations is about intervention and like training the person into functioning better, and it like doesn't make sense. Like big virtual simulations of grocery stores to make people with dementia shop better. It's really weird. It's like they think that if they like train automatic responses more, that somehow we'll get like faster at stuff, and it's like that's not actually working. And so I think of executive function, and again, remember, there's that book that has 12 chapters and 12 definitions, so like none of us know what we're talking about. So when I describe executive function to you, just think of it as this is a useful way to think about it. It might work for you, and you can throw it away if you don't like it. Anyway, I think of executive function as this sort of like innate property. It does change throughout the lifespan, and it does change depending on like substances that we've ingested, but it's otherwise like, this is your executive function today, right now. Whereas metacognition is ways that you work around whatever your level is today. And that involves the things like, I know that I'm going to have a hard time doing the dishes, but I need to, so I'm going to play a YouTube video. That's the metacognition. I know that I'm not going to eat unless I eat with friends, so I'm going to go on a lunch date. That's metacognition. I know that I cannot break this task down because it has become my one impossible task and I'm afraid of it, so I'm going to ask my friend to help me. That's metacognition. And so, yeah, metacognition is like this the conscious thoughts about how are you going to work through this. And in my work, I'm trying to advocate, metacognition is often a like communal process. Like you don't do it all by yourself. It's the power of friendship. Okay. And somebody else had asked about avoiding the trap of comparing productivity to your peers or your near peers. That's really hard. I actually think this is easier in academia if you think about it in a certain way. Because in academia, you are all the doctors are doctors in a very specific thing. So none of us are comparable. So it doesn't work. And so like, I could be sad that I don't publish as much as Carrie Feisler. But Carrie Feisler is a different situation than me and has different funding and has a different institution and has more access to students. And like this different, like even within your same department, they're studying different things. Some things are easier to study. That's just true. And not easier in the sense that their work is easier, but like they can produce more studies because the experimental setup is just easier to streamline versus like doing a digital ethnography of autistic people on the internet took me like 2 years because y'all write a lot and don't respond for 5 days. And that's okay. Like, but it's not easy because, you know, going up for tenure is like this, the whole thing. And but the truth is even the tenure document is about yourself and not about how you compare to other people. And it's, I mean, the tenure process is also fraught and a bunch of bullshit. And like, so there's that. So just for your own soul, don't compare yourself to other people. It doesn't do anything good for you, just makes you sad. And just think about it like, you know, when it's hard to not compare yourself to other people, just think about like what you do is just different. It's apples and oranges. And that way it kind of breaks your brain for like thinking, well, I don't have 20 publications. And it's like, well, you do humanities. They don't want you, it takes longer and it's harder actually. And it takes longer and it's, you know, just. Does rejection sensitive dysphoria somehow fit into this conversation? Yes, mostly because rejection sensitive dysphoria is trauma, and a trauma response is a huge executive function fucker. So yes. But like what's happening is it's a trauma response that is completely subverting your ability to like self-regulate and to like your body floods with the stress hormone and the crying starts and you're like, I'm not even that sad, but it's too late. And you're, so, you know, it is basically like, it's not something you can often metacognition yourself out of when it's an active trauma response, but you can set up some things like, here's the person that I talk to when I'm having this feeling. Or here are multiple people I can talk to, because if it's rejection sensitive dysphoria and the person that I talk to about it is the person that's mad at me, then I can't talk to them and now my life is over. So, you know, like having places where you can talk about that is, or even if it's like a private journal, which sometimes works for people and sometimes does not. I'm looking through the chats. Yes, there's a hand up. Rachel, you can use your mouth.
Yes. First, I just wanted to thank you for having this webinar. It's been so insightful and useful. And a question I have is, some of these strategies, I'm curious because, like, for instance, you gave an example of like setting an artificial deadline. One, and a problem that I at least have personally is this feeling of like lying to myself. Like I tell myself that I'll do something and I'll like set the strategy up in place, but basically like I just end up kind of like lying to myself. And then there's that secondary feeling of like shame if I'm not able to kind of meet my original specification. So I'm just curious, like if you have any strategies for being like totally authentic and real with yourself. And I understand part of that is knowing yourself too, but there's also that kind of like other side to it where it's part of the executive functioning is like knowing how to task manage. And so sometimes the result is it feels like I'm literally like kidding myself or lying to myself when I say I'll do something.
And so one of the problems is that there's a difference between the way that I talk about these things and the way that I experience them. Like I talk about them like a sarcastic shit poster, but I actually like, so I talk about them like you lie to yourself and you make a fake deadline, but actually what I'm doing, because when you make a fake deadline, that inauthenticity often does sabotage you, right? And so I say, this is when I want it done. And I want it done now, this time, and not when it's actually due, because I have other stuff going on. This is when I want it done. And then I also, let's see, is there anything weird and sensitive on my calendar right now? No. I think it's fair to say that y'all know I'm in therapy, so you can see that. Okay, hold on. Okay. So can you see my Google Calendar right now?
Yes.
Okay. This, I did not finish it today. In fact, it was here, and then I changed it to revision plan. And I made revisions and I moved them here, and then I moved them here, and they're gonna go. I did do some work on it today, which was nice, but I'm gonna move it here. Okay, and that is also something that I'm okay with. I have let go of the shame of I'm moving the thing, you know. And
But then like there's the one thing, it's like, okay, there's the emotional feeling of it, but it's literally also outside of the emotional side of it is like literally like like lying to yourself a little bit. Like when you keep having to move the task again and again, and then the issue is like with the actual deadline, you can't do that anymore. And I'm like, on one hand, I'm concerned about the feelings, but for the sake of this question, it's like a legitimate, it's too big of like, I don't know if this question can really be answered or not, but it's something that I struggle with.
so for me personally, I just reframe it. Like, I'm not lying to myself. I wanted to do this today. Some stuff happened and I didn't do as much of it today as I wanted to. I did do a little bit, and that was actually a big win. And I'm just going to move it to tomorrow because that's when I will focus on it more. And that I'm not thinking about it like I lied to myself. It's more like, this is what you're trying to focus on today. And maybe something will go wrong, and that's okay. There is also, though, what you talked about where eventually the real deadline happens, right? And the real deadline is here. And the truth is that this real deadline has two things going on top of it, plus all these meetings, and it's a big fucking mess. And I don't remember where this was. Anyway, but that is also something, earlier I talked about not being able to polish stuff, not being able to edit stuff, and sort of accepting that as like a tax that I pay by sending unrefined things out for review, and like just knowing that it's going to take my stuff longer to get published because I do that. I also have contingencies in place for what happens if I miss this deadline. I have fallback plans. I have other conferences I can send this work to. I have other journals I can send this work to. And I have this like fallback plan. And I do this so that I don't feel devastated when, for example, in the spring, when everybody was pretending like COVID was over, but I was still losing access to childcare and didn't have a full week of childcare for the first 8 weeks of the semester. And we'll be like, okay, let's say that it is Monday and I still have to do this. That's definitely not happening. Then I'm just going to move this right now. And I'm like, it's fine. I will do it. And then it will be done on time. And then I get a call from school and my kids are sick. It's gone. It's not getting done. It's not getting done. And it's not the end of the world because I have a whole lineup of places where I will send this next. And that's a very specific kind of academic, I think, thing, maybe that doesn't work in all workplace contexts. But actually in like, quote unquote, the real world, the deadlines at work are often flexible too. And when you are getting up against that line, a good, healthy work environment would actually work with you to like finish that thing or to like give you the extension. But again, I can't pep talk anybody out of having a shitty job. So like the advice only works in certain contexts.
No, this was very helpful. I think they're reframing, and also I thank you for sharing your Google Calendar. That was helpful visual as well.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm glad that it was useful. And I'm just checking the chats for, oh, yes. Yes, the captioner will have to leave at a certain time because they have another booking. I can turn on auto captions when that happens. Yeah. Yeah, and it is technically over and you can leave, but I won't make you leave until 8:30. Okay. Okay. I will I'm gonna say words that wrap it up and stop the recording, and then we can still talk. Thank you, everybody. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you liked it, maybe find a way to let me know, because I can talk about this shit as like research all day, but when I'm actually doing it for people, I feel like a fraud. And I hope I didn't like upset anybody or fuck up your day. So anyway, the power of friendship. Love you, and thanks again.